Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 10. So welcome to those of you who are joining us here in Zoomland and also to those of you who are watching the recording. Welcome. So welcome to actually our final Zoom workshop for this unit. So the final content-based workshop, I guess I should say. So next week, as Mia has emailed you, will be an assessment support drop-in session. So those of you who are starting to get towards the end of your assessment task, or those of you who still have a few clarifying questions to make sure that they're on the right track, you can just drop into the session and I can help you with those specific questions. So this week, we're going to be exploring curriculum, so delving a little bit more deeper into what we looked at in the lecture. And of course, this content is also going to support you in completing the third case study reflection. And I guess importantly, it's also going to give you that foundation to assist in knowing and understanding and applying curriculum during your placements and then in your future professional practice. So to support what we're going to be looking at today, there were a few pre-workshop tasks that you need to do. And this is for those people that are watching the Zoom recording as well. So, of course, watching this week's lecture and reading chapter 6 of your textbook, Teaching Making a Difference. And also there was a clip all about the ACARA website that we suggested that you had a look at. So this was introducing the actual website to you. So hopefully you've all had the opportunity to have a look at that. Oh, and also our early childhood students. On top of that, you were also asked to have a look at the early years learning framework as well. So familiarizing yourself with that particular document. Okay, so from watching the ACARA clip on Blackboard, hopefully you would have developed quite a good understanding, a good idea of what the curriculum looks like and also how expansive it is as well. So as noted in the clip, the ACARA website, it's actually recently, when I say recently, in the last couple of years, it's been modified to make it a bit more user-friendly, because as you can imagine, there is so much in there. And so they've adapted it a little bit just to make it easier for you to negotiate. So those of you that have had a good look at the website, you'll see that it's developed by ACARA, of course, and it includes a range of resources to support teachers in implementing the curriculum. So it has things like illustrations of practice, there were work samples, lots of teaching and learning tools, and also something that I think is really helpful to you. There's some links to research, and this is to guide your critical thinking, especially when you go into your placements and you need to really think about and identify those specific pedagogical frameworks that you come across. So it will help you to unpack those particular frameworks. So I guess in reality, when you go out on placement, all of you, early childhood, primary and secondary, you're actually going to be spending quite a bit of time looking at this particular website. So I really want you to develop quite a good understanding of it. So what we've got is a quiz with some questions to guide your understanding. So they're the questions there that we're going to have a look at. And what we've got is a Kahoot to help you to become familiar with the website. So very soon I'm going to move you into breakout groups to access the website. So you'll need to access it on your device, and you will also need to access the Kahoot link. And so you'll find this on Blackboard. So if you go, it's just sitting underneath the Zoom workshop engagement materials. So you'll see Australian curriculum quiz. So in your breakout group, I want you to have a look at the website. You might want to start by having a brief chat about what you thought about the website. Then I'd like you to start answering each of those questions on the Kahoot. So I think you have 20 seconds or something to answer them. So I'd have a look. If you haven't already had a look through the website, I'd familiarize yourself with your group because I want it to be a discussion. It's something that I'd like you to learn together. And for those of you who are watching the recording, I'd like you to do the same. I'd like you to go to the website and then have the Kahoot there, and I'd like you to complete that quiz. So it goes through lots of different terminology and different features of the curriculum, because when you go into your placements, you're going to need to be able to discuss all of this with your supervising teacher. So it's important that you're familiar with all of this terminology. I would take note of it all as well. So as well as doing the Kahoot, I would at a later date go back through and note this down. These are some of the things that you might like to have in your placement folder, just to refer to if you need to. The more you use it, the more familiar with it and the terminology you're going to become. So any questions before I put you into breakout groups?
Sorry, Angela, did you say the Kahoot link is in under the engagement?
Yep, so on Blackboard for this week, if you go to the Zoom workshop engagement, so if you, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my device as I'm speaking to you. So Zoom workshop engagement, online students only. If you keep on going down, just underneath that, it says Australian curriculum quiz. Has everyone else been able to find it? Yep, you got it, Lara? Are you looking in the right week?
We're week 11, right?
Correct.
Yep.
You might need to refresh.
Okay.
Try refreshing.
Yep. All right, no worries. I'll keep looking.
Yeah. So has everyone else been able to access that? Give me a thumbs up if you have. Okay, those of you that haven't, 6, we've got 6 of you, 7, 8, numbers going up. Okay, so if you haven't been able to access it, Molly, did you get it? You did. Excellent. Got it, Lara? Fabulous. Beautiful. All right, so let's see how many. Let's have 3 to 4 participants in the group. So someone's popped the link to it in the chat. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Let's have 3 to 4 participants. Are we ready? Okay. Lots of discussion, guys. So those of you who are listening to the recording, I'd like you to do the same. Go to the Kahoot, have a look at the curriculum website, and just go through each of those questions just to familiarize yourself with it. Okay, so everyone is back from our breakout groups. Haven't lost anyone, which is always good. So how did we go? How did you find the process of doing the Kahoot together? Was it helpful? Yeah? Did you all talk to each other? Yeah. Nods. Good. Excellent. Excellent. I've got a thumbs up from Kevin. Thank you. It's always good to get a bit of feedback because, I need to know if breakout rooms are generally well received. I know some students don't particularly like them, but it gives the opportunity for online students to really mix with others and share perspectives, which is such an important part of teaching. Okay, so how many dimensions does the Australian curriculum have? 3. Okay, what are they?
Learning areas, general capabilities, and cross-curriculum priorities.
Beautiful. How many learning areas does the Australian curriculum have? 8. Thanks very much, Angela. You can put it into the chat too if you want to. What about, what were they? Who wants to speak up?
So there was English, maths, science, humanities, the arts, technologies, HPE, and languages.
Excellent. And so how many general capabilities?
7.
7. Yeah, and they are literacy,
Literacy, numeracy, ICT, critical or creative thinking, personal social capabilities, ethical understanding, and intercultural understanding.
thank you, very good. How many cross-curriculum priorities? Excellent, 3, some sign language there. And what are they?
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and culture.
Yeah.
Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia, and sustainability.
Yeah, so these are very important points to remember going into placement. And so what's the document that the cross-curricular priorities derive from?
The Melbourne Declaration.
Yeah. So of 2008. So that's a really important document. And we're actually going to talk about that a bit further later on, well, in the next slide. So it's critical that you really keep going back to the website and start to develop your understanding about it. Start to familiarize yourself with it. So some of you, I'm not sure if any of you have got children in school, you may already be familiar with that. Lara's nodding. So you've looked at the website before, Lara? Yeah, excellent. Okay, so we've done our quiz. And I just want to talk about a few points in regards to the curriculum, because as pre-service teachers moving into placement and in professional practice, you're going to need to be familiar with the curriculum subject areas. So you need to know about how they're taught and also the specific achievement standards that are involved. So this is something that you're going to learn in your other units, and you're also going to become more familiar with it as you do each placement. So you'll need to know the specific key concepts and also the learning outcomes that describe what students are able to understand, what they know and do within these particular subject areas as well. You're also going to need to know ways to integrate the curriculum across and within these learning areas. So this is going to involve finding those authentic links between subjects, so to assist students in developing that more in-depth understanding, and also to assist them in increasing their engagement and, very importantly as well, their motivation. So to be able to do this, it's going to require a really good understanding of all those relevant local and also global issues as well, so that you can really provide content that's very authentic to that individual context, and in some cases the individual student as well. So you're also going to need to be aware of the depth of understanding and the sophistication of knowledge and skill that's expected of students at the end of each year. So again, that's something that you can derive from the curriculum. That's going to be fairly standard. It's not something that is going to be, that will change from one school to the next. So formative and summative assessment data and observation that we've talked about in previous weeks, that's going to need to be used to measure your students' progress. And then it will also help you, as we discussed, to make those further steps, either to improve your teaching, but also your students' learning as well. So that very important collection of data and evidence to show your students' learning. And of course, collaboratively sharing and analysing this data is also going to be an important factor. So with colleagues at a school level and also with parents as well, that's going to be an ongoing priority. So report cards, parent-teacher interviews, but also just general ongoing communication with parents as well. One of the very important things that you're going to use the data for is to reflect on and evaluate your own practice as well. As we discussed, that's going to be something that you will do on an ongoing basis, both individually, but it might involve other colleagues in your learning environment as well. So, as well as having a deep understanding of the curriculum content, you're also going to need to consider all of those factors that influence curriculum decisions in your context. And this again is to make sure that content is meaningful and relevant to all students. So we're getting back here to considering the diverse needs and life stories of your students, something that you would constantly be reflecting on in each of your learning environments. So for our early childhood students, we asked you to have a look at the early years learning framework prior to the session. So on the slide are the 4 main aims of the ELF, the early years learning framework. It's actually considered a low definition curriculum, so more of a guideline or of a framework. This is where early childhood teachers can interpret and modify it to suit their specific contexts. And you will see this done in prior to school contexts. And for those early primary contexts that still do reflect on the early years learning framework, and there's some that do, it will be interpreted in different ways. So the early years learning framework, it outlines the key principles, practices, and outcomes of teaching and learning that you need to consider. And it's also about a smooth transition to school as well. So from kindergarten to prep, making sure that there's continuity there as well. And again, this is where age appropriate pedagogies came in to assure that, that smooth transition. And like the Australian curriculum, it is essential that the content is considered alongside a shared philosophy of teaching and your theoretical frameworks, and taking ethical considerations into it as well. So early childhood students that are here, or those watching the clip, you really need to make sure you familiarise yourself with this document prior to your 15-day kindergarten placement in August. So that's in EUB 140, and you're going to have Sally Savage is going to be the unit coordinator there. Okay, so looking a little bit more specific, curriculum, it reflects the purpose of education. So this is constantly being discussed and debated with a really broad range of diverse views and values informing this debate. And we discussed this in the lecture. I unpacked it looking at those 3 different levels. So it really does make curriculum quite complex. It involves many considerations of how policy translates into practice. And this is going to involve quite a few considerable variations over different educational settings. So different schools and prior to school settings. So the process of planning and implementing a curriculum, it can therefore be quite difficult and uncertain in some aspects as well. So I really want you in your placements to talk in depth to your supervising teacher about how they use curriculum in each of those environments. So getting back to the Melbourne Declaration, I think the key to planning and implementing the curriculum is making the purpose of education central to our decisions. And the Melbourne Declaration outlined 2 specific goals for that. But before I share these, I really want you to think about what you think the purpose of education is. Because as a pre-service teacher, I really hope that you're starting to develop your understandings about this, because as we keep on saying, your views are definitely going to influence your decisions about practice and how you enact curriculum. So what are your thoughts? I want you to share what are your thoughts on the purpose of education. You can pop them into the chat, or you can verbally share them if you want to. But I'd like all of you to share what are your thoughts about the purpose of education. While you're typing into the chat, I asked my 16-year-old son this. I said to him, Lexter, what do you think the purpose of education is? So he's just started year 11. And he actually said to facilitate growth for future life. No kidding, he really did say that. And for me, that actually sums up what it really is. To facilitate our knowledge, our understandings, our social development, our worldview, all of those things. So no one has shared anything yet. Angela, are you still typing, did you say? Yeah, all right. Jake, thank you. So presenting past, current, future knowledges to others, and based on their understanding of this information, can apply this as part of their everyday life. So work, social life, etc. I love that. That's great. Really good. So another response from Angela, providing the knowledge that students need to succeed in whatever career path they wish to pursue in their everyday life. Another good one. Excellent. Should I wait? Is anyone else responding? Lara, to produce a holistic students at the end of their education that have knowledge, emotional intelligence, worldviews, and success in themselves. Excellent. So, Lara, you also think it's about identity and developing, I guess, self-worth and self-understanding. Love it. Really good. Anyone else typing away there? All right. So I guess to summarize, I guess some of the things that you've really thought about there, things like job preparation for the future, so for 21st century, we're talking about active participation in society. We're talking about things like leading a full life, and that really does involve that participation. Kawa says to change students and lead them to a better future, not actually need them to get very good grades, but hope that they can apply knowledge to make their life better. Okay, so that's good. So not necessarily a focus on high grades, but making sure that they can apply that knowledge to make their life better. So that's about leading a full life. And I guess it's also about self-discovery as well, as Lara mentioned in hers. One of the things that for me that I think is really important, and I think this is probably based on my philosophy, being an early childhood teacher, is developing a love of learning and inquiry. And I think that's something that does start very, very early in early childhood, and it needs to be developed more and more as you progress into primary and secondary, and then hopefully into higher education as well. But really instilling that love of learning and the importance of continually being an ongoing learner. Okay, so those getting back to the goals of the Melbourne Declaration. So they basically acknowledge that there are many challenges and many opportunities moving into the 21st century for our students. And they provide two fairly general goals to guide education. And also it was to guide the Australian professional standards as well. So goal 1 was Australian schooling promotes equity and excellence, and all young Australians will become successful learners, confident and creative individuals, and active and informed citizens. So very much what, we've all discussed and inputted into the discussion. So really, these all need to be central to our decisions about practice, and actually how we choose to enact that curriculum content. So in all of our learning environments across early childhood, across primary and secondary. So, the purpose of education needs to be central to that. And it's good to see that everyone seems to be on a similar page to what that might involve as well. So I'd be interested to hear what some other students who are watching the recording might think about that as well. Okay, so we've established that the Australian professional standards describe elements of high quality, effective teaching. So there is a very specific focus, as we've seen, on teacher knowledge, practice, and engagement. So across the different stages in a teacher's career. I asked you in the pre-workshop activities to look at the standards, and I wanted you to have a think about how we can identify where knowing, understanding, and applying curriculum might fit into them. So what did you come up with? I'm just going to have a think about it. While I'm plugging in my computer, I want you to think about it, and I want you to type some things into the chat. So I want you to think about how we can identify where knowing, understanding, and applying curriculum comes in. This is what happens when your children steal your chargers. Okay, so Lara's got 3.1. Molly says the entire section 2, know the content and how to teach it. Nikki says 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and Angela's looking over at 6.1, identify and plan professional learning needs. Yeah, so I think there are some really obvious standards. So as we said, standard 2, knowing the content and their subjects, that's pretty straightforward. We could also look, at ICT and maintaining students' safety as well, 4.4. But I guess generally, it can actually be applied in regards to knowing content and understanding the concepts, the substance, and the structure behind the content. And it's also about applying it purposefully as well. So it's evident across all of the 7 standards. So guiding how we enact content through our professional knowledge, our pedagogical practice, and also our professional engagement. So we can see it across all of those standards. And once again, I'm always coming back to the standards because that's what you're going to have to do on your placement, always, but also in your professional practice as well. Always coming back to those standards, making links to them. So I think in the process of designing learning experiences and lessons and units of work, teachers need to consider the government's intended or official curriculum, which we can see sitting on the top there. So it outlines the knowledge that's currently valued. This is this overarching curriculum. It influences what is taught in educational settings, what learning is measured and when. So it's updated regularly based on research evidence and changes in policy and state and federal governments, as we discussed in the lecture. And as you know, at a state level, each state and territory, they're going to have varied curriculum focuses and lots of considerations that influence the reason, the purpose, and the design of the curriculum at this level. So then this interpretation is then intended to be implemented in schools with some flexibility. And it will be according to jurisdictional and system policies and the context of those individual settings. So as discussed last week, this would involve schools developing that pedagogical framework, so their individual pedagogical framework, with choices around how they implement that curriculum content. So at the micro level, teachers are encouraged to then apply their creativity and their personal understanding of the curriculum, of pedagogy, of assessment and reporting. So this is then what is interpreted, translated, and enacted in practice. So adapting and modifying, often in the moment, as it's appropriate to cater for the needs of students. So really that enacting is about, or it's ideally about, putting learners at the centre. So I guess in enacting the curriculum, we also need to acknowledge here that the pedagogical and personal beliefs and values of you as future teachers, they're going to play a really significant role in what is actually translated into practice and what is enacted. So that's quite significant, what is actually enacted, those choices that are made. So we can see here on the table from Teach Queensland that we looked at, curriculum actually sits as just one of many factors influencing and shaping teachers as practitioners, and all of those decisions on how the curriculum is enacted. So, other factors include things like decisions about how we plan and prepare our learning program, the development of teaching and learning materials, the choice of resources that you're going to use, those important decisions around catering for learner diversity, understanding and acknowledging our biases, choices about how we assess and report student progress. So this is going to be directly linked to your important decisions about, the frameworks and things. And of course, how we choose to liaise with our colleagues, administrators and parents as well. Again, that's going to be connected very much to the frameworks in each individual school, but also at that micro level as teachers. So curriculum is just one of many factors which needs to be considered. So I asked you to have a look at this article prior to the workshop today. It's it really emphasizes the very large body of research that's coming out on how children learn to read and how best to teach them. So this is a big focus. It's referred to as the reading wars. So it's that ongoing battle between phonics and a whole language approach. So it's caused a lot of tension and some conflict in schools and prior to school settings. So this recent study outlined in the article, it aimed to end this so-called reading wars, with research indicating that actually phonics is an essential foundation in the early stages of learning to read, and that phonics is a very important part. But it also identified that it is only part of the approach. So it needs to be taught within the context, with children's literature and also their own writing being very central. Did anyone get the opportunity to have a look at the article? Yeah? What were your thoughts? Anyone want to share? I think one of the things that the research also suggested was that it's important to take a unified national approach, which is something that's actually really lacking at the moment. To ensure that there is an appropriate level of phonics instruction in every state and in every educational setting. And so it's about providing that consistency in curriculum and pedagogical approaches to support children's learning. So, this national consistency is lacking with each state and then each individual school making these decisions for themselves. So it's quite significant, and one of the reasons why I pulled this reading wars out as an example of different priorities that are coming out. Any comments? I'm checking the chat. Yeah, thanks, Lara. Also, to focus on individual student needs. One approach may suit one student, but not another. Excellent. So constantly thinking about those individual students and their diverse needs. Excellent. Okay. So I want to break down some types of curriculum, which you would have read about in your textbook reading. The negotiated curriculum, the first one, it really involves learners having agency. So with their desires and interests very much central to decisions about what knowledge is valued. So unlike the intended or the official curriculum, a negotiated curriculum, it would actually involve the educator having conversations with learners and their families. So the focus is to learn about their experiences and to identify their strengths, their needs, and their interests. So very child focused. And it's also co-planned and negotiated as well. So another one, the emergent curriculum, it's generally used in early childhood and primary settings. And this involves the educator not really imposing a plan on the child, but instead directing the child or the student into meaningful learning experiences. So central to this is the use of what we call intentional teaching practices. And this is very much a term that you will hear in prior to school settings in early childhood. So things like observing, listening, questioning, and guiding, those sorts of things. So it's very much about each learning experience, or sometimes referred to as projects, emerging from the interactions between the environment, the child, and the educator. So the educator in this case really needs to keep an open mind about what learning should or shouldn't take place at any given moment. So it's very much encouraging the children to lead their learning. Now I've got an example here. This is from a kindergarten learning environment, and it's actually from one of my pre-service teachers when they were out on practice on their first placement. And they were, you know, the placement that they went into were actually using the emergent curriculum. So they were able to follow a lot of those principles. So from discussion with a small group of children who had observed a golden orb spider in the learning environment, the teacher, the pre-service teacher, sat down in the playground with some butcher's paper, some pens, and the group of interested children. So she started with their prior knowledge. So what they knew about spiders. So these are some of the things: 8 legs, hairy, they eat bugs, we shouldn't touch them, and they make webs. So the next thing they looked at, what they actually wanted to find out. So this was directly from the students, and these were some of the things that they said. And then the final question that she put to them was, how would they find out the information? Very obvious one. Google it. Books, that's a bit out there. Spider-Man, yeah, it's got all the answers. And then one of the students said, my dad. And the pre-service teacher was very excited about this, and she came back to me and she was telling me all about it. And I guess this is one of the reasons why I used this example, because the school was near the Eco Sciences Centre, and the parent was actually an arachnologist. So he actually, the pre-service teacher organised for him to come into the learning environment, and he shared the book that he'd written about spiders. So of course, from this, there was lots of experimentation, things with web construction and web shooters, and together the students and the educator collected information. They set up a documentation area with lots of pictures and of course with labels to encourage language and literacy development. So the planning was done by the children here, and it was documented as what we call a learning story. So this was to be shared with the parents, and it had follow-up ideas linked to the early years learning framework, to the curriculum, and to the learning principles and outcomes as well. So we can see here, it's very much linked to inquiry-based learning. and usable across early childhood, primary, and I would say as well into secondary as well, if you wanted to use a more critical approach. But it's very much child-centered, but teacher-directed. So some of the other curriculum types that were outlined in your textbook, you can see them on the slide. So the first one, the hidden curriculum. So this is all about those unspoken or implicit academic, social and cultural messages that are communicated to students while they're actually attending school. So they're communicated at home, but also at school. So this would include things like the values, the stereotypes, and the social expectations that we have. So social expectations around things like gender, language, behavior, or possibly morals. So all of these things that are embedded in what we say and what we do. And often this is unintentional. So by teachers, but also by other students, by fellow students in the learning environment. So the null curriculum, this is all about what is chosen not to be taught. So what knowledge and intellectual processes and histories are excluded from the curriculum. So educators every day are making decisions about what learning to censor or to ignore. So this may be around what they might regard as possibly sensitive topics. So it could be about sex and sexuality. It could be about death, or it could be about domestic violence. So these might be deliberately ignored by educators, or talk about them might be discouraged, even when students might actually show an interest in finding out about them. And this could be because a teacher might be embarrassed or doesn't know how to broach the subject or the topic. Or it also could be involving the school-wide context. So it might be seen as a contentious topic, or it might be counter to community values or beliefs, depending on the individual school. So this notion of the null curriculum, it really does raise important issues about what children and young people actually learn in schools, what is enacted. And it also is important when considering the decision making and also the power of the educator. And again, it comes back to our purpose of education. So really important things for you to think about in terms of going out on your first placement, and the kind of things that you might want to observe in the learning environment as well, because they're often things that your supervising teacher may not actually talk about, but it might become clear that this is something that they're doing. And as I said, it could be unintentional. So the final one here is the lived curriculum. And this is often the most important thing that students learn from their schooling. And it's not planned or contained in the official curriculum. So in this sense, educators, it's not about them delivering the curriculum, but it's about creating the curriculum with children and young people. So of course, this involves critical pedagogy. So it's where contradictions and challenges are unpacked as they arise. So it's about taking on those learning moments. And, you know, it's, again, this is coming back to supporting children and students' understandings around social justice and equity issues. So the lived curriculum. So I wanted to give you an example here. We've already looked at this particular example, so you're familiar with it. I liked it because it picked up the hidden curriculum. So I want you to have a read, and I want you to consider what is the student learning about herself in this learning context? How is the environment impacting on her self-worth and identity? Have a read. You can type in the chat as you go if you think of something. Same for those of you watching the recording. Have a read and think about that. What is the student learning about herself in this learning context? So I'll give you a few moments. I'd really like you to think about this because it's like using our worked example. I'm giving you this particular example and I want you to relate what we've discussed with it. What is the student learning about herself in this learning context? How is the environment impacting on her self-worth and also on her identity? You don't need to just type it into the chat. You can verbalize it as well if you want to. Thank you, Angela. So she's not accepted by the people in her class and will believe that she is different or that there is something wrong with her. Definitely. That's a good point. So she's not valued for who she is. Maybe she's feeling like she doesn't fit into the stereotyped norm of what she believes is acceptable, of what her environment is telling her is acceptable. I can see Lara typing there. I'll give you some time. Anyone else? Jake or Kevin, Jody, Ben, Kawa or Joey, any thoughts? So she's also learning about gender roles, significantly different views on it. Yeah, definitely. So I guess this is where the teacher needs to step in. You know, step in and to ensure that the classroom culture is one that is accepting, where all students are valued for who they are. So how might this be possible? What kind of strategies might a teacher use to encourage this classroom culture, this supportive classroom culture? Any thoughts? I guess the most obvious one, well, for me anyway, is modeling appropriate behavior. So making sure that the teacher provides learning experiences that reflect all life stories, which we've talked about before. I think another one as well, discussions on inclusivity. Excellent, thanks, Laura. Yeah, so really making sure that you deal with situations as they arise, and this may involve those discussions. You know, making sure that everyone is valued and included in the environment. And this starts right at the beginning of the year. So you need to set those boundaries, those expectations. And that can be, reflected in the language you use, the resources that you choose to use. Molly says collaboration between the students, so encourage students to get to know each other deeper than what they may believe due to stereotypes. Excellent, that's a really good one. Thanks, Molly. Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. So going into more depth about specific issues and focuses in the environment, and, talking about things as they arise, not brushing them under the carpet, and thinking about, as a teacher, what strategies you would use if a student did bring something up, what you would discuss and how you might broach the topic, what particular documents you might point the students to support their understandings, what the school policies and procedures are about those kind of particular issues. So some schools may not think that it's acceptable to talk about some issues. So as a teacher, you need to make sure that you are fully aware of that. All right, so moving on, another example of the null curriculum that I wanted to share. This one is in regards to Indigenous history. So I think largely null curriculum, it's seen as cultural and political and as part of the official curriculum. But this Guardian article, which I encourage you to have a look at, it did a survey of teachers, and it noted that when questioned about the lack of content around issues like stolen generation, Eurocentric histories and reconciliation, that the lack of content around these issues was often about the time issues. So time was noted as being a specific reason why they didn't discuss these particular topics. In a crowded curriculum, they have to make specific decisions about what to exclude. Decisions are often made to exclude this content over others. So the power and the choice around what to exclude moment by moment is actually in the hands of the teachers. So teachers, administrators, and parents, they all contribute to establishing and maintaining this null curriculum. So the choices about what not to teach. But it isn't just a cultural and political decision. It's all, not just made at that higher macro and meso levels. It's actually something that is made at that micro level as well. And we can't forget that. It's something that individual students teachers can make decisions about. Okay, so we've gone through a lot about curriculum, building on what was discussed in the lecture. And so this is going to really assist you in your understandings with the third and final case study. So I'm going to go through case study 3 for both early childhood and primary, and for secondary as well. And then after that, I'm going to go through and look at some of the mindsets and the skills that we've unpacked over the course of the unit. And I want to actually talk about how you can utilize them in your future learning environments. So in going straight into the early childhood primary scenario, it takes a very similar structure as the secondary one that we unpacked last week. So there are 3 videos. One video is about an experienced primary school teacher who feels that she lacks capabilities in the area of science education. So it's about content knowledge. And then there are some associated questions for you to consider after watching this video. The second one, it's about a remote school in Western Australia that works closely with the local Aboriginal community to develop two-way science programs. So again, there are some associated questions for you to consider. The third one is about Burnie Primary School in Tasmania, and they've actually developed a STEAM program with a specific focus on makerspace. So, you need to reflect on the benefits of makerspace, how comfortable you feel with teaching STEAM, and how you might be able to build your knowledge and skills in teaching specific curriculum areas where you lack confidence. Because as a teacher, there may be quite a few areas that you need to do some specific research on. So are we all familiar with what STEAM is? Yeah. So just to clarify, so STEM, it actually represents science, technology, engineering, and maths, but STEAM represents STEM plus the arts, humanities, language arts, dance, drama, music, and visual arts. So it's something that you might like to reflect on, especially if it's an area that you don't have a lot of understanding in. So from this, you need to watch the 3 videos and consider the questions to identify one critical moment for yourself across the 3 videos. So just need to focus on one video, one particular critical moment. So a sentence starter that might help you to get started and help with your understanding. One that I wrote down was from watching the 3 videos and responding to the questions. The critical moment for me was, this made me wonder. This is important because, and then the final one, it made me question. So you can see what I've done from that first R, from report and respond. I've looked at those 4 dot points and I've got a sentence starter for each one. So I'm going to say them again. From watching the 3 videos and responding to the questions, and the critical moment for me was, this made me wonder. So in making what you wonder, you're talking about a specific critical issue, which will be around curriculum. This is important because, so this is explaining why it's relevant. And then it made me question. So you would be posing questions to address as a result of the incident. So these questions, normally about 2, I think would be a good number, will be your focus in the next 3 R's. So again, the same as what you've been doing in the other 2 reflections. Any questions from our early childhood or primary students that are here?
So with those questions that were provided with the case study, that's not meant to be our questions, that's just a spark,
No,
the critical moment.
That's just it. That's part of the stimulus, Nikki. A good question. That's part of the stimulus. So it's just to get you thinking. And as I said with the secondary students last week, those questions that sit underneath the video, they're actually going to help you in responding to relating, reasoning, and reconstructing. So it's to help you start thinking about that. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Good question. Anyone else have a question specifically about the early childhood and primary case study, number 3? As always, making sure that your reflection is referenced to current scholarly literature, that you use appropriate APA formatting, and you submit it by the due date. So case study 3 for our secondary students. So this one is quite interesting. It's actually presented as a screenplay. So you're actually going to use reflection to critique and consider curriculum issues outside of the classroom. So looking at Scott's experiences. So it follows Scott, who encounters several issues when he's out on placement, and he actually states specific things. He actually says things that he wishes. So things that he wishes that he had approached differently or had a better understanding of. So it's saying there that you should look out for that particular word, wish. So in the first R, report and respond for this particular case study, I would suggest that a sentence starter with something like, what have I got? From reading the screenplay and the Padlet, because there's an additional resource as well. From reading the screenplay and the Padlet, I identified with the specific critical moment where Scott wished he ... Going to read it again. From reading the screenplay and the Padlet, I identified with the specific critical moment where Scott wished he ... So again, this is reported what happened or what the issue or incident involved. And then this made me wonder ... This is important because ... It made me question ... So again, these questions, the questions that you pose will be your focus in the next 3 R's. Any questions? It says in the task sheet, identify a critical moment for Scott. You are relating to this as if you are Scott. So that sentence starter that I've given you, it covers that. So you're thinking about it from Scott's point of view, that you are Scott. So from reading the screenplay and the Padlet, I identified with the specific critical moment where Scott wished he. So you're identifying it. Any questions? Check in the chat. No. So the same, making sure that you engage with the learning materials, that you make links to the Australian professional standards, making sure that you go through each of the dot points in your 4R's tool for reflection guide. Have a look at the rubric, the criteria sheet, to make sure that you're covering all of the important areas, that you reference all statements that aren't your own. And if for some reason you're stuck, I would suggest that you have a look at the recording of the workshop for week 9, I think it was, yeah, for week 9, where I unpacked all of the different R's. And if for some reason you're still a bit confused or you're unsure, you can email me and I'm happy to help you. So with the very first R, with those first 2, report and respond and relating, we did some peer feedback with that. And I said that you could email me those, the first 2 stages of your first reflection, just so that I could say, yep, you're on the right track, proceed with your next 2 reflections. but that was just for that one reflection. You need to now work with that knowledge, that understanding to complete the next 2 reflections. Any questions? Okay. Check the chat one more time. No, all good. Are we ready to move on? Angela, have you got a question?
I just had a question, but it's not directly related to the secondary
That's
one or
okay.
anything.
No.
So it was just about perspectives, when they were saying we need to look at it from different perspectives.
Yeah.
Is that so literature talking about the topic as well as policy documents? Is
Yep.
that what? Okay.
That's good. Yep. So that's great that you would consider policy documents as well as literature. Because as we talked about in the lecture, when it comes to curriculum, if we're talking about this particular reflection, there are many different perspectives on what it could be. And it's at those 3 levels that we unpacked. So, use what you've read about in the readings, what you have got out of the lecture and what we've discussed in this particular workshop to help with those understandings. Okay. So where to next? As this is the last content focused workshop, I really want you to think about what we've encountered, what we've discussed, what you've learnt so far about teaching and being a teacher and the roles and responsibilities. And I want you to take that now and think about how you're actually going to use this in terms of your placements, but also in your future professional practice as well. So over the course of your degree and then moving into professional practice, you're going to be drawing on each of these concepts that we've discussed. And also those personal and professional reflections that you made when you were engaging each week. So you would be reflecting on your personal beliefs and your values and how these might influence your practice. So who are you and what sort of teacher you want to be? So how are you going to develop and maintain resilience and a growth mindset? How will you enact change and support your practice through ongoing learning? So all of these things that we've discussed in the unit will relate specifically to those challenges that you might face as a teacher and how you might overcome them or work as a change agent to overcome them. So in terms of skills that you've developed in the unit, you'll be using and building on your observation and your reflection skills in each of your placements. So this was, we put a lot of emphasis on reflection and observation. So you'll be observing and reflecting on student learning. And also, very importantly, you will be looking at the practices of your supervising teacher and the learning environment as well. So reflecting and observing that in detail. The content and the engagement from the unit. So this is going to provide you with a foundation that will be used in later units and while on your professional experience. So key concepts such as learners and learning and curriculum and pedagogy, they're going to be used in units like EUB 106, so Introduction to Curriculum, Pedagogy and Assessment. So it will be unpacked in more depth. This is providing you with the foundation. And very importantly, I know I keep harping on about this, but I found it personally helpful when I was an education student, continually building on your teaching strategies companion. So constantly adding those tools to your practice as you continue through each unit and each professional experience, your placement, you need to keep building on those teaching strategies and, of course, the theory behind it as well. So skill sets, no, I've done that. Professional experience. So as it says on the slide, over the next 3.5 years, you're going to be completing a minimum of 80 days of supervised teaching. So this is where you're going to make those links between theory and practice. And you're going to have the opportunity to observe, to reflect, and engage as part of the development of your teaching skills. So first up, I want to have a look on the slide you can see for early childhood. So this is, you have 5 placements in early childhood. So this is because you're going to be able to teach in both prior to school and primary contexts. So this year in August, you've got your kindergarten placement. Then next year, year 2, you'll have your birth to 2. So this is a requirement of a CEQA for you to be registered as an early childhood teacher. So this is an important placement. It gives you the understanding of the importance of observation and the need to have a very critical understanding of child development. So you would complete your child development unit before you would take on the birth to 2. So year 1, in 3rd year, yep, years 1 to 3 in 3rd year, semester 1, and then kindergarten and prep in your final year. So your final placement will be linked to your QTPA, your performance assessment review. I'm going to go into a bit more detail about that soon. So that will be in your prep to year 3 placement, not your kindergarten placement. Any questions from our early childhood students about any of this? So we've got a total of 90 days. You can see it broken down there. Okay, so moving on to our primary and secondary, we can see here that it's a total of 80 days for both of you. So 4 placements over 3 years. Again, your final placement, years for primary, it would be prep to year 6, and for secondary, year 7 to year 12. That will be linked to your teacher performance assessment, so your QTPA. Any questions, secondary students? Checking the chat. Nope. Okay, so I wanted to just give you a bit of information. Wait, don't we have a year 1 semester 2 unit for PECS? EUB 107. Let's go back. This, unless it's changed, Ben, this is the information that I have. So EUB 107. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it says requires a blue card, and you're going to be doing 15 days.
So you're saying for this year?
Oh, yeah, semester 2.
Are you talking early childhood?
Oh, no, secondary.
Secondary. No, you don't have a placement this year.
I must be reading wrong then.
Yeah. No, your placements will start in 2nd year. But that is a very good question. I'm going to talk about blue cards very soon after I've talked about QTPA. We've got QTPA. It's been developed to meet the requirements to assure quality teacher registration. So registration and also preparation. So it's a culminating assessment. It's designed to demonstrate your teaching competence. It's assessed against the graduate level Australian professional standards. And as I said, it's linked to your final placement. So this will be your capstone assessment task. So as pre-service teachers, you'll be expected to demonstrate your understanding of the complete planning, teaching and assessing cycle, as well as showing how you use evidence of student learning in your planning. So that will be an important part of it. So what it actually looks like, what it comprises of, there are 4 components to your QTPA. The first 3 are your written components. So this will be assessed by a panel of 3 QUT education staff that are trained in the QTPA assessment. The final one is an oral presentation. So this is a 15-minute oral presentation by the same panel of 3. So as you can see, your personal teaching statement, component A, is very important. And of course, it all starts at this first assessment task you did with stepping in. And as I've said, it's continually developing over the next 3 years. Any questions?
Can I ask about the oral presentation? Is that something that we put together and present, or is it more like a job interview where the panel's asking us questions? How does that work?
So you will write your component A is your personal teaching statement. And so B and C, you can see what they are. So component D is where you orally talk about it. And
Okay.
then you will also, at the end, be given 2 questions.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, very important to remember. I'm one of the QTPA panel members. A lot of the your tutors and your lecturers are as well. Many of us have done the training. I assessed QTPA last year and I've got it this year as well. It's all very encouraging. It's not threatening at all, you know, where we want you to do well. And you're given a lot of scaffolding to complete it as well. So it's not something that I think you should be worried about. The most important thing is that you keep up with your coursework. And, you know, those things like the teaching strategies companion, all of those things, that's what's going to help you. Marking an assessment, I noticed that one of the questions was what pedagogical framework was used in your school, and the student responded, none. And that's the basis of how they were meant to have planned. And every school will have some sort of pedagogical framework, you know, whether it be intentional teaching or I do, we do, you do, you know, all of those sorts of things you need to identify. So everything that we're teaching you now is you're going to be using it ongoing in your placements and also in your professional experience. So everything is relevant.
Angela, can I also ask, if we want to consolidate learning over the semester break, how long do we have access to Blackboard for to go back and watch lectures or whatever?
I'm pretty sure you have access to it for a long period of time. You know, you are able to download some of the resources and things as well if you did want to use them in the future or with your understandings. I'm pretty sure you do have access to it for quite a long period of time. I couldn't tell you exactly how long though, Lara. I'm sorry, I can't.
Oh, that's all right. I can check with HiQ. I was just wondering more over that semester break.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to go back and rewatch anything or.
Yeah. No, that will be there. Can you email me and I'll get back to you about that. So email me that question and
Sure.
I'll find out for you. All right, so some things to keep in mind. Some very important things moving into your placements. So you need to maintain a GPA of 4 to be able to go out on placement. You will need to obtain a blue card from HiQ, a blue card, and HiQ can assist you in if you haven't done this. If you have a blue card from another organisation, you have to make sure it's linked to QUT. Again, HiQ is the place to go for that. Early childhood students, of course, if you haven't done that, that is a matter of urgency because you need to go out on your placement in August. Of course, you also need to successfully meet the Landtite as well. So I think this is by 3rd year, but believe me, get it out of the way as soon as you can. If you haven't had a look at the Landtite benchmarks and the information on our Blackboard site on EUB 104, I would definitely have a look at that just to familiarise yourself with it. Ben, so is it possible to get a blue card on the mid-semester break, or does it have to be linked to the specific organisation for placement? No, it has to be linked to QUT, not the specific organisation that you're going out to. Ben, any questions about your blue card? I suggest, or anyone that has questions, you contact HiQ. They'll be able to give you advice, in-depth advice, much more than I would be able to. But a good question. Any questions about any of those points? Okay, so finishing up, the final thing is I just wanted to remind you about the student voice survey. You would have received a unique link to complete the survey, and we really encourage you to take a moment to provide some constructive feedback. So some feedback for us that's actionable, specific, and kind, please. Each year we actually use student evaluations to either continue what we're doing or to adapt our teaching accordingly. So exactly what you're going to be doing in your practice, everything, all of our purposeful decisions that we make, we very much tailored and for individual students as well. So there's a bit of a table there as to the sorts of things that we do with it. Any questions about the student voice survey? Okay, any general questions? We've come to the end. Are there any general questions? It could be about professional experience. It could be about your second assessment task. It could be about QTPA. Anything?
I just had a question about like the workshop when you were talking about null curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not sure if is that, so you were saying how it's like generally ignoring or avoiding topics.
Yeah.
And is that something that we don't want to be doing? So, or is it a type of curriculum that
in terms of the null curriculum, it is what is chosen not to be included, as you said. But some of this is, there are many reasons why we choose not to include some specific topics, as I discussed. And one of them might be because it's a school issue, that it's something that a school may decide that this isn't something that you would discuss with a certain age of student, or that it's not within their value base. So it would be school specific. So again, you would need to have an understanding about the school policies around those sorts of things.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And just with the final reflection,
Mm-hmm.
should we try and like focus on one particular type of pedagogy, or I'm just not sure what
Okay.
to focus on?
It will depend very much on which particular stimulus you're particularly interested in, that you identify with. Again, so that you can go through and relate to it in that second relating section, I think it needs to be something that really means something to you, Angela. So that will make it much easier. And then in the reasoning section, so when you're connecting between reflection and theory, this is where, as I've said before, if your specific questions, you know, they're fairly focused, it's going to be make it a lot easier for you in terms of that theory. So I, again, think it's better to focus on one, possibly in lots of depth, because you're limited with your word count, rather than several just scratching the surface.
One topic or one type of curriculum?
Well, possibly one type of, well, definitely one topic, but one type
Yeah.
of curriculum.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Good question, as always. Anything else from anyone? So Jake, Kevin, Jody, Kawa, Joey, anything that I can help you with? Ben or Molly? Lara? Everyone's okay? All right. If you get to the point where you're doing these reflections, you get number 2 or number 3, I'm hoping that everyone's finished their first one and well and truly onto the second or the third. But if you do get to them and you need some support, please do not hesitate to email me. I'm very happy to support you in any way I can, except reading any further drafts. I'm not allowed to do that. Okay, we might finish it up there. Thank you, everyone. So next week, as I said, is our drop-in at the same time. If you've got any specific questions, it could be questions about content that you need clarification about, or specifically about the case studies, please come along. But it's not compulsory, it's a drop-in session. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ange. See you next week.
Bye.